All right, hey everybody, welcome back to another MSP live chat. I'm Jonathan Crow. I'm Director of Content Community at Ninja One. And I've got with me, as always, Tom Watson. He's our channel chief advisor. How you doing, Tom?
Hi, everyone.
And Tom survived, along with me, last week for any of those of you guys on the line who joined our IT Horror Fest. It was a great event. Great up until the very end when we had subjected ourselves to the toe of Satan, the world's spiciest lollipop. And I had a complete meltdown. Tom, you handled yourself pretty well afterwards, and I'm glad to see you here. You made it.
Yeah, I was really surprised, John, because it was brutally hot, like the hottest thing I've ever tasted. But within 10 minutes, the heat inside my mouth was gone. And within 30 minutes, like even my lips were fine. I was amazed by how fast it wore off, but it was painful for about 15 minutes.
For anyone who wants to see me have a complete breakdown, who missed it, you can. I dropped a link. There you go in the chat. So you're welcome for that. You can watch that after the fact. But we're not here to talk about the toe of Satan. Although, Colin, if you're up for it, we could maybe get you one.
I don't throw around the term dumb often, but that is not something I would want to participate in ever.
It was truly horrific. Tom says he rebounded quickly. It took me a good half hour to feel anywhere close to normal. We had other folks like Tom Lawrence. We had Kelvin Teglar do it, who also suffered through it. Matt Fox, who's on the line here too. It was fun. Anyway, IT Horror Fest. Thank you for everyone on the line who joined that and are back with us for this live chat. And thank you everyone for coming and joining us if this is your first time. So before we dive into this, and before I give Colin the introduction that is his due, I wanted to give a broader hello and quick housekeeping. This is a time where all of us are connecting with each other. You guys should use this as a time to connect to each other in the chat too. We're going to be talking about strategic planning for 2022, and Tom and Colin both have a lot to say about that, but I'm sure you guys do too. And so we've dropped some polls down there, and we want to hear from you there, hear what your challenges are, priorities, what you guys have cooking, what you're planning. And also, don't be shy. Jump in the chat. Tell us what you guys are thinking about and ask each other questions. Definitely highly encouraged. The last thing to note is this is being recorded. You guys will all receive a recording link after this, along with a link to this resource doc that I have up here that I'll pull up on screen for a second. Consider this kind of like the stage notes, but also where we drop links to a bunch of good resources we're going to be talking about. First of all, right up here at the top of the doc, we've got a link to learn more about Colin. And
Oh boy.
he is the founder and CEO of Gradient MSP, which launched just this summer. Colin, I'm sure it feels like years ago at this point.
It's been so we started the company in October of last year. So we're like almost we're 12 and a half months into it, but it has been a whirlwind adventure so far, to say the least, but it's been a ton of fun.
Well, it's been awesome seeing you guys launch and being so active already in all the channels and groups and everything. Leading a lot of discussions, sharing a lot of materials, and you guys are going to be kicking that up a notch. You've got an event coming up in a couple of weeks that we can talk a little bit more about, but I'll go ahead and tease it. Why not, right? So
Why
let's
not?
scroll. Why not? Oh wait,
What's that?
what's that?
What's that?
That is
Get a
Tom.
load of that.
Oh, that is Weapon X himself. Look at those claws. Those are legit claws, Tom. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what those are made of?
They're 440 stainless. They're straight up dangerous.
Yeah.
Tom not only ate the toe of Satan with us for the IT Horror Fest, he showed up dressed as Wolverine, and then it looks like you went out after dark too and probably terrorized some people with these things.
I did. I went
Keeping
to
the streets safe.
I went to a costume contest. I was in a finalist. I lost because apparently you had to be part of a group contest, but
Oh, boo.
I made a good showing.
You didn't have any of the fellow X-Men that you could join?
No, I'm going to next time. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get some other guys from the gym, and we'll all go as superheroes and win next year.
There you
But
go.
apparently that was the thing. I was a finalist. People said I looked great. Most people wanted to vote for me, but had to be a group costume to win.
Boo.
Yeah.
Boo, boo, boo. Well, you're part of a good team here with Colin. And so, Colin, we'll just jump right into it. You want to give a little shout out to Leg Up, which is happening
Yeah.
on Wednesday, November 17th?
Yeah. So a lot of people think that this is just a product launch event, and it is. We are launching a product at the event, but that's not what it's about. We've been pretty vocal about where we're looking to take the business and the IT channel as a whole, and this is really going to be the first step out where we can unveil and explain our vision for this industry and how we're going to go about it. And so, yeah, definitely sign up. If nothing else, do it. We're giving away like free lunch for a month for two
I was
people
going to
out of
say,
the
I
first
mean,
1,000 registrants. Like, who doesn't want lunch? But yeah, like sign up. We got tons of great content. I've seen and reviewed some of the keynotes already. Obviously, I've reviewed mine. You don't want to be late if you show up. It kicks off right at 11 a.m. Eastern. Yeah, we're kicking in straight up, like no minutes late. It jumps right into the keynote because it's just we want to get it out there and let everybody know. So yeah, super grateful. Ninja's on there. We've got some content from Ninja that's as part of the event and a whole lot of stuff. There's been a lot of questions about what we're doing. We're going to answer a lot of those questions in the keynote, I think. But beyond that, we've got a good friend, Ray Orsini, is coming on to just grill me and Dave on anything. Like nothing's off limits. So if you have questions about what the heck we're doing, how we're going about it, what our true intentions are, we're there to answer all the questions. So yeah.
That's perfect. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, it's depending on where you're calling in from. East Coast folks, I mean, it's lunchtime, so the free lunch is definitely interesting to me, if
Right.
nothing else. But no, that's great. That's awesome content, and it flows right into what we're going to be talking about now. It looks like you got some really good topics going on, so definitely encourage people to check that out. Let's go back up before we dive into our discussion here. I just wanted to. Well, let's get past Tom again. Okay, so let's go first to the polls because I want to hear what people were thinking. If you haven't had a chance yet, go down to the bottom, folks, and check out these polls. We have some series of questions. First of all, just with planning in general, it kind of was interested in taking people's temperature on this. And Tom and Colin, I'm kind of interested. You guys talk with MSPs, of course. Your backgrounds, your former MSP owners, you both had successful exits. And then have since gone on to staying in the channel and lending out your expertise and doing things like this. You guys talk to MSPs all the time. Do you guys have a sense of kind of what the thermometer is for next year? I mean, from our poll here, we got people kind of even keel. We asked, on a scale of 1 to 5, how bullish are you feeling about next year? And we've got some people saying 5. Yeah, let's rock. Let's do it. But right now, the most votes we have is an even 3. So people are like cautiously optimistic. Maybe does that kind of match with what you guys are seeing and hearing too?
Yeah, it's been very similar. I mean, you got some of the people that 2020 was a shit year. Let's just call that what it was, right? They're trying to survive, trying to get through stuff. 2021, they're just right setting, getting everything back, trying to push things forward. So there's a fair amount of people we've talked to that are saying 2022 is the year. This is when they're going after it and gonna make the big growth moves. But then there's those conservative folks that are like, hey, I'm just gonna keep going. I'm not doing anything crazy. Like let's just keep a slow and steady pace, which totally respectable.
Yeah, and I want to get into kind of going back to your experience when you were growing your MSP, and talk about kind of how you approach things. And why don't we just dive into that actually, and we can come back to some of these poll questions in a bit. But can we do a little bit of time traveling and take the audience back to when you were running your MSP? And maybe just like years, like when you started versus like when you exited, and we can kind of get into that. And before you do, let me just give another quick little plug here. You and Tom actually covered this in even more detail in our podcast, MSP Breakthrough. And so in this Google Doc, you guys will be able to check out. a link to that podcast and hear you talk about your breakthrough moments, which is really cool. But yeah, Colin, why don't you take us back to give us a little context there?
Wow, let's see. So I started an MSP in 2008. That crashed and burned in about 9 months, and then did my MSP. Kind of kicked that off in 2009. Grew that. We hit 4 million in ARR in about 5 years, and then at that point, I exited the daily operations of the company, and then ended up selling it a year and a half after that. So. Was kind of a quick path, but strategy and execution was all about how we went about that. We repeated that same strategy or that same methodology, I guess I'll call it, at Passportal, where over 4.5 years we did the same thing and grew to several million in revenue as a global tech company, and then exited that. So.
Wow. So, I mean, that's a really pretty condensed time period. How much did you starting and failing before play into your being able to pull this off the second time around?
Yeah. So I think there was definitely some learnings from the failures. A big thing for me was all about not being unwilling to try things, right? You know things are going to break. You know things are going to go wrong. But you're going to learn a lot of lessons by trying those things and what worked and what didn't work. So, you know, whether we were running a service company or a software product company, it was always innovating, always trying something different, always trying something new, see what sticks, see what resonates, see what worked, and then going on that. We obviously set our milestones of what types of things and metrics we wanted to achieve, but we really broke it up by just, you know, throwing the proverbial spaghetti at the wall and seeing what worked, and not being afraid to try things no matter, you know, what customers we were dealing with, what products we were dealing with, who we were bringing into the business. And I think that's what really helped drive us.
Can you go into a little bit of like, in terms of like your team size and maybe some other mile markers for you?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up this screen here a little bit. This is a graphic from that podcast episode, and I apologize that the text here is a little small. But basically, we kind of broke things down. Tom loves to do this too, like breaking down by ARR, right? And so we've got breakthroughs happening at 1 million, 2, 3, and 4. And I'll just read this for people who I'm going to have to squint too. But basically, the first one for 1 million, you had talked about hiring a service delivery manager. So you could kind of shift and focus on sales and business development as being kind of a big breakthrough. But can you go back to even before that with the beginning, for the folks here on the line who are thinking about, they're trying to answer the question, how strategic should I be right now? And you know, when you're early on and you've just got yourself or maybe a couple others, I mean, there's fires happening all the time. You're in the day-to-day. You know you should be strategic. I guess can you give us a little bit more clear sense of like what your planning process looked like? Like how planned out did you get?
Yeah, so I've never written a business plan in my life. So let's get that out of the way. When I think about strategy and stuff, there's multiple layers to that. As a one-person shop, I knew what I wanted the company to become. I knew what I wanted to achieve with that company. And no bones about it. The plan was to eventually sell that company, and I had a number in mind, and that's where I wanted to get. And so for me, I'm big about, you know, setting what's that big goal, and then reverse engineering from there what I need to get there, right? And that comes in the form of milestones and what you need to achieve along the way to get there, right? But again, I never wrote a single strategy. I did things like, hey, part of my strategy was in the first year I want to hit 1 million in ARR, right? And for me, it's, well, what are some things I can do to hit 1 million in ARR? And am I tracking along the way to get there? Do I need to burst on something? Do I need to completely throw something out and redo? So you need that flexibility and agility as you're going. But we did hit that 1 million in ARR in our first year in business as an MSP. And for me, it's just about determination, focus, and executing, right? You don't need to have that like set list of all of these tasks on your whiteboard of everything you're going to knock off to get there. It's do the things that you believe are in the best interest and towards achieving that goal, and break it up. You can't say, hey, I'm going to make $1 million in ARR this year, so let's break that up and I need to hit 250K a quarter. No, that just means by the end of that year, you need to be at 250K in ARR, right? So your first quarter might be 50K in ARR. How are you going to go out and get that? And what's the best way to go? Typically, you're going to say, hey, friends, family, close network and stuff like that. And then, the next quarter, maybe you want to hit to 100K. And then the quarter after, you want to hit 200 and then see if you can burst past. So, that's just kind of how I've always approached stuff is take what the big goal is, reverse engineer it into the years based on the timeline of what you're going to do, and then break that up into quarters and months and weeks. Like, what do I need to be doing on a weekly basis to make sure that we're on track for that? So,
well, I'd love to dig into that a little bit further, because you do make it sound simple, and I know it's not.
So simple.
But Tom, I want to bring you up too, because I know the folks who have been on live chats before are familiar with you and your story a little bit, but can you give, for the advantage of the folks who are new to this, a quick background about where you were in terms of being an owner, and then can you dive into a little bit, like, here listening to Colin there with his perspective of planning, how did things with you kind of change? How did you address it?
Well, yeah, I reached a point, right? I started my MSP, and I didn't have any particular goal. I, too, didn't have a business plan, and I've owned a number of businesses. I've never written one, but I've always had an idea, like Colin spoke to, of where I eventually wanted to be with this business and around what time, a relative date to work towards, where I wanted it to be at that point. So I had those milestones in place. And then just like Colin, listen, I wasn't nearly as good at that. I didn't have $1 million ARR at the beginning of the first year. But once I realized kind of what I wanted to do ARR wise, then I kind of broke that down. I did the same thing, and I realized what pieces do I need to put in place, what marketing do I need, what sales, what software do I need, what processes, and getting those things all lined up so that I could then work towards those goals made a big difference. But the main thing that I think I latched onto that Colin spoke to was breaking these down into smaller, more achievable goals is what really made it happen for my business.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for that. And we've got something that we'll be sharing in just a few minutes here, where we've got a template that people can use, and it kind of maybe goes. Obviously, your mileage will vary. This is for you to kind of use and see if it works for you and adapt. But it kind of goes to the heart of what you guys are saying of what are helping you kind of put on paper, because there's always value in having things put on paper, right? It makes it a little bit more real. Put on paper your big high-level goals and then kind of break them down in a quarterly way, assign ownership, figure out the right ways to track them and everything. And I'm very curious to see people's kind of reaction to that and what they're thinking, how, whether they think it's actually something that they would do or not.
Jonathan, so one thing I want to jump in there, you just said, I think it's one of the most important things, I'm sure Colin speak to this, is when you have these goals of where you want to be, and you break them down, and you just said something about it, is delegating to the right people. Realizing, hey, I can't do all of these things myself. Finding the right people and finding that person who makes a good account manager, finding the right person service manager, and letting them develop their own kind of ecosystem and world within your business and run with it, because then I take that off my plate. And I've noticed in talking to many MSPs, this seems to be the hardest part, is letting go of these things and letting others do it. But it's really the key to scaling a business up.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, Colin, I think we have in the article for the podcast that you did with us, I think one of the big takeaways that we put, a quote from you, was that hiring is the biggest growth accelerator. And just to the points that Tom said, but maybe going back, you mentioned kind of your getting up to $1 million ARR that first year, and how you kind of broke that down. Can you give some context about your team size, or kind of what it looked like, and how hiring played a role in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So exiting that first year, I want to say there's 5 people, including me. So 4 other people on the team to do that. And it kind of came in at what Tom said there. You're not going to be the best at everything. You got to find what you are the best at and what you love doing. You got in business because you loved something about it and you wanted to be able to do more of what you loved and less of what you don't. So for me, I didn't love continuing to do the tech work. So I wanted to find a way where I could be out and engaging with people and driving the business forward and fostering and helping mentor and coach other technical people with what I had learned over years of consulting and working at other MSPs. So the first few hires were bringing on just straight technicians, right? There was kind of 2 to 3 technicians that I brought on and worked with them and coached them and mentored them on this path for me to be able to exit the technical operations. And then I did that and it was good and I kept kind of managing them, but then I realized, hey, I'm splitting my time here and we're not hitting our targets on growth and what I expect to do because I'm spending more time managing the people, even at kind of 3 people, than I am out selling and getting our business out there. So that's when I worked and brought on a service delivery manager who could offset any of the last little bit of technical work I was doing and manage that team and help keep fostering and growing that team. And that was it. Like that's where we got to in that first year. After that, it was putting a plan in place of what the structure of the team moving forward needed to be. So we were always kind of keeping our ear to how things were going, watching the business, and coming into the second year, we recognized that there was a substantial amount of project work that was coming, and that was consuming up technicians' time, and that was then forcing our service delivery manager to be a project manager / people manager, and that just was, again, another distraction. So from there, we kind of split up and said, okay, now we're going to make a straight projects team. So we need a person that heads up projects, and we need a person that heads up service delivery on kind of the managed services side of things. And so we just kind of kept focusing on that as we went through. And I think we exited the second year, we were 12 or 13 people. We hit 2 million that year. And then that was kind of our oh shit moment where we said, if we're going to keep growing at this scale, we need to slow down and make sure all of our systems are in alignment so that it can, be a strong foundation and a proponent to our growth, not a hindrance. So kind of year 3 is when we took step back, foot off the pedal a bit, right set our business from a structure and technology and staff point of view, and then kind of went back on in years 4 and 5.
Man,
I want to jump in there real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I want to jump in real quick because Colin just hit on something reminded me. I remember when I brought in a couple of higher level technicians, and I thought I was this rock star technician, and then I realized I'm trying to keep up with these guys, that they're solving tickets much faster than me, and it took me a few months to let go of the ego, and I think that's part of it. And I had to let go of the ego that, hey, I'm not that great a technician, and but I'm a good business person, and I was good at sales, and then finally I did, and I made those guys the top technicians, and I let go of that. And when I let go of things and I realized my place in the business and what I need to devote my energy to, that's when things popped.
Yeah.
So guys, I'm really loving a comment from Cliff that came in, and then some questions that we're getting here too. And I really wanted to give you guys a chance to react to them because they're good ones. So Cliff is hitting at kind of the chicken or the egg thing, right? So, okay, yeah, it's great to know that you need to let go, but as Cliff's pointing out, you got to have growth. You got to have the revenue to be able to pay a salary, right? You got to have the growth to have the hire. You got to have the hire to have the growth.
Yeah.
And Colin, I mean, you addressed this directly. I remember when we spoke previously. Do you want to get into that at all? How did you handle that challenge?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things. One, it's coming to terms with the fact that there's being comfortable and then there's growing your business. They don't really coexist together, right? And that's just a reality of things. You have to be willing. When you got into business, you took a level of discomfort. You took risk. It's the exact same thing with growth. you can't always wait until you have all of the possible revenue to then hand off, because at that point, you're probably so overworked, you have no time to put a job posting, review applications, interview candidates, bring them on, train them, do all of that stuff. So you kind of have to premeditate and be proactive about when you are going to need to bring people on, and be prepared for some discomfort, whether that's not paying yourself for a bit, whether that's taking a pay cut yourself, or whether you just use that as the fire in your belly to get your ass out and keep pounding those streets and get that extra business to cover what's come on, right? You always need that motivation and stuff. And sometimes when you're at the top, you kind of feel untouchable, but it's also very lonely. And it's one of those kind of issues where you don't want to face that discomfort anymore, but you need something that motivates you, and you need something that drives you to keep going, because you don't have that boss that comes in and lights a fire under your ass. Sorry, Ninja, I curse a little bit sometimes. But lights that fire under you and gets you going. So you need to give yourself things that do that. And sometimes that's bringing on new staff. Sometimes that's, taking on and overextending with a client. Sometimes that's like we did. We put the brakes on growing the business, yet we had hired for where we expected to be at the end of that year. That's a terrifying move. So that's inspirational for us to kind of keep going. The other part is everybody looks at total cost and total burden of a salary. So like Cliff, when you're thinking about hiring somebody, if you're looking to bring on even a junior technician, let's say that's $40K a year. Chances are a lot of people, and maybe you included, is saying, $40,000. I need to come up with $40,000. $40,000. No, you don't necessarily, right? Like that's $3,500 a month. Can you float $3,500 a month? You're not committing to a full year term with somebody if it doesn't work out, and that you have to pay them 40 grand no matter what, right? You're not paying 40 grand up front. It's like the perfect opportunity of having a payment plan with no interest that you can totally get out of the loan after if you're not happy. So it's just a matter of coming up with how can I get that 3,500? If you're a lifestyle business, maybe you're paying yourself 10 grand, 12 grand a month right now. Pull back for a little bit. Talk to your spouse if you have one, or don't tell them and just be like, oh, I don't know. But do what you need to do to afford those people to come in and do it, and then use the inspiration to replace that revenue or replace that money to come in and cover the cost going forward.
Okay, well let's talk about. I love that we're getting comments here in the chat. You're firing folks up, Colin. This is great. But let's address that taking on risk component, because absolutely hear you there. At the same time, what can folks do to mitigate the risk? Like to make sure that they're hiring the right role. Yeah. That they're hiring the right person. Like they're making educated guesses there.
Yeah. So there's a ton of things you can do to mitigate your risk, right? Is first, get yourself to a profitable point in your business. If you're paying yourself something, you've got a bare minimum of how much money you need to survive and cover your own bills, right? And in the early stages, you probably shouldn't be taking more than that amount of money out of your company every month. So build up a little bit of a nest egg or a war chest, as a lot of businesses call it, so that you've got some kind of float. You've got a cushion there to be able to do stuff with. That's one way to mitigate the risk. The other is how you tune your contracts with clients, right? I've seen and met with MSPs who would take quarterly payments. So now I've just got paid for 3 months in advance. I can play with that money. It's there. I can use it. I can leverage it. And that's a popular topic in bigger companies, is leverage, right? What can you loan and use future performance to get access to dollars to use today? There's a whole bunch of ways. The biggest thing though is hire slow, fire fast. As ruthless or crazy as that sounds, it's the reality. Take your time to hire the right person and bring that person in when you're ready and you're good with that person. But realize, again, you didn't sign a 1-year contract with that person to be here, or I hope you didn't, right? Everybody starts with a probationary period. If it's not working out, give them a few weeks to prove themselves and adapt and everything else. If it's not working out, move on to the next person. And it might sound ruthless. This is your livelihood. This is probably your retirement savings that you're trying to build up and protect. So there's those types of things you can do to mitigate it. Or there's, lines of credit. I ran stuff on credit cards for a while. It all depends on what your goals are and how convicted you are to achieving those, and what kind of pain or sacrifice you're willing to put up to get there.
Tom, I want to give you a chance to run in there. We're getting some good comments too, and Kelvin has a great question. But before we do, yeah, I mean, any other reply there in terms of finding that balance? I mean, how did you take it on?
Yeah, what I did were a couple things. I kept a pretty good team of part-time technicians on the side, people that previously worked for me that moved out of the area or that were just looking for work on the side, like project work. And what I would do then is try to line up when I brought another full-time tech on with a big contract. And what I might do is I might space that new big contract so that the client didn't actually go under the managed service agreement immediately. I might be just have them under some project work or some prepaid hours to get them up to speed where I'm not completely beholden to them. And then as I brought them on, and then by the time they went on a full managed service agreement, I got the full amount from them. That's when I would have a new full-time tech starting, because I was always trying to make those things happen, or I utilize those part-time techs on the side more and more leading up to that. And then also Colin spoke about something really great. I would go to at the end of the year, because I know we're talking about end of the year, I would go to my best clients who I really liked, and I would give them offers like, hey, listen, pay me for next year, like especially the ones I knew were flush, pay me for 11 months and I'll give you the whole year. And then I would get a bunch of cash at the end of the year, and I would use that to kind of fund starting out really strong the next year, because I'd have my coffers full. It would allow me to bring on a full-time technician and know that I had the cash in the bank to pay for that person for several months without feeling any pain.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're one thing, I guess, before we jump off to another question here. If you want to touch on, Colin mentioned, mitigating risk contracts, and that's a point that you preach, Tom, in terms of getting people onto longer term things, having auto renewals, stuff like that. You want to speak to that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. But like you said, the timing of contracts. I didn't always have every client when I first brought them on start right on a contract, especially if they were in rough shape or their hardware needed to be overhauled. I'm going to do that as project work, make a bunch of money on the hardware and the service up front, and use that as kind of a springboard into the agreement, but not have them on that agreement until my company is ready to take them on and when I can make it more profitable. I feel like at times I took contracts on and put someone right under an agreement early on, and I look back at it and I've got like 3 or 4 months of not profitable on that contract, which is fine in many cases. But if I could avoid it, I really wanted that contract to start to be profitable as soon as I can. And so I kind of scaled that with the project hours, those part-time techs, and when I kind of aligned bringing the new people on.
So, I mean, I think so much of this, a big part of this is like knowing your numbers, right? Just having a clear sense, and this is where we can drop a link to the cost calculator that Tom has developed and has shared with folks. Just knowing your profitability, knowing how profitable your agreements are, knowing your numbers there to be able to make good, educated decisions. Kelvin brings up, and Cliff, he gets right into, I guess he blew up Cliff's spot here. Cliff apparently just lost lost 50% of his business client. I mean, a huge client for him. And this kind of gets into something that I wanted to bring up a little bit later, but I'll do it now. So our previous live chat, this is back before the IT Horror Fest, a couple weeks ago, back before the Toe of Satan, which changed my life forever. Before that happened, we had a live chat with some good folks that actually Colin knows Ravi from MSP Corp. They're a Canadian-based company that invests in MSPs, and they do some acquisitions. They're an investment firm. And they gave us some guidelines, right? And I wanted to pull these up with a big caveat. I actually spoke with people after that live chat, and a lot of the numbers we were talking about and a lot of the direction there was really focused towards a specific scenario of selling your MSP to either private equity or even companies like MSP Corp. And I wanted to make sure that I followed up this chat I spoke with some folks afterwards, and there's also options for other people too. If you're not going to hit these types of numbers, it doesn't mean that you can't have a good exit. I just wanted to put that caveat out there. Now that said, they did have some overall guidelines, right? And if you look across like MSP investment outfits, you'll see these same types of things coming up a lot. They'll want you to be achieving a certain amount of revenue and profit margin. Of course, they want you to see really high customer retention. They also put an emphasis on what percentage of MRR is your revenue. But a couple of things that kind of go to this point here is they want to de-risk these investments, right? They want to see a client list where no one customer accounts for 25% or more of revenue, and no 5 customers account for 50% or more. And so it's just kind of interesting. Like if you are planning out, not necessarily for next year, or maybe you are, but further down the road, if you do want to go like Colin's route, and you want to be acquired. These are some things to keep in mind. You start to have these bigger goalposts, right? It's like, okay, not only do I need to focus on customer or client acquisition and growing my revenue, I also need to think about like what my client list looks like to folks. And this kind of gets into some of the questions too about focus on a particular niche or industry, having it kind of those whale clients that are kind of imbalancing things. How you address that is something I wanted to toss back on to Colin first, and then Tom and anyone in the audience as well, because I think Ravi's suggestion from MSP Corp was like, okay, if you have a big client, obviously this is one way to solve it, is what happened to Cliff, which is not a good way. But another way is you try to go after and get another one of those big clients, which of course is easier said than done. But Colin, like any reaction to kind of that advice of looking at these bigger things of like, okay, you need to be obviously growing your business and bringing on new clients, but the type of clients you're bringing in, you have to be thoughtful about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw in the chat somebody was saying, I think it was Calvin, shouldn't be more than 8%. I was played by the rule of 20. Is I never wanted to have a client that was worth more than 20% of the business or revenue. And truth be told, we had a client for a long time that was dang near 50% of our revenue. And go back to that fire in the belly thing, that terrified me, because if we lose that client, there's no way I'm finding another single client to do that, to replace that. So I use that as the motivation for me of how can I get that business to be under 20% of our revenue. And part of looking at that, there's the opportunities of let's just go get a bunch of big clients or everything else. You got to realize what's in your wheelhouse. And we cut our teeth a lot on that client. They grew extremely rapidly, and they continued to help support our growth, and we helped support theirs. But really, those weren't the perfect clients for us. Everybody sits there and goes, "Oh, I wish I had $250,000 or $300,000 annual contract with a client." No, you don't. Not at the stage of business that you're probably at, because that's terrifying and what impact it can have to your business. 2, chances are you don't have the experience, your team doesn't have the experience to deal with and support a business at that level of maturity. Because there's a whole different game of rules and everything else that comes into play with those companies to effectively support them and help them find greater success with technology. So we did a lot of work to understand and realize what is our sweet spot. And our sweet spot was 50 employees. So we decided, okay, well, what's a reasonable range inside of that? So we said we'd go as low as 20, and 20 was the minimum client size we would bring on, and as high as 100. Because kind of once you're 75 to 100, it's not much difference of who you're dealing with. And so that's what we went out and just knowing and arming ourselves with that information helped us target the right type of clients and the right type of businesses that we were actively pursuing and marketing to and connecting with and chasing and trying to sell, so that we weren't wasting our time talking to people that were outside of that we wouldn't be successful with them, or we wouldn't be making enough money off of them. And so we did that and put that as a focus and went through it. If we kind of want to circle back to the whole topic today, is about creating strategies. And a big part of strategy is not just what you want to, what big nut you want to accomplish or the big rock or whatever else, but it's 2 things. One, what can you do to get there? And what risks do you have to mitigate? What do you have to protect yourself against that could encumber your ability to get there. And so you always have to have this two-pronged approach to things of, again, this is what we're going to do, but what can derail this? What can put us off track? What can hurt us? Clearly, losing a 15% client can hurt that, and that can encumber that. So what can I do to mitigate that? One is obviously get a bunch more clients. The other is what can we do from a customer experience standpoint? And I get that Cliff's was a different one, reading more about it, that, you know, they got acquired and that stuff happens. Right? But what can you do from a customer experience standpoint to make it so that you mitigate the chances of people falling off? Because that's the reality of business. The biggest encumbrance to hitting your revenue targets is churn, right? It's not being able to sell. It's losing what you'd already sold. So what can you do to mitigate that? And the other thing I've seen is people overwhelm themselves by either setting too high a target or trying to do a million things to hit that target. Write down on a list all the potential things that could contribute to you hitting that goal, and then find the most impactful 2 or 3 and do that, right? And try that. And if one of them's not working, throw it out and grab on the next one in the list to make sure that you're hitting that target. But
yeah, I mean that's fantastic, and I wonder if we can kind of segue here into getting down and dirty, because some of the questions here we've gotten are like, you know, what are the what's the best marketing tool that you were using, some more tactical stuff. And I guess in order to get into that a little bit, I'm just kind of curious with both you guys, and Tom, I'll let you go first. How you went from, okay, we've got a plan here. This goes back into your point about delegating. How you started breaking it down and actually making it happen. And before you dive in, I just want to bring up here on the screen. So this is a very simple template we got here that we want to give you guys. And I pulled this from, I ripped this off. I'll be completely honest about that. I got this from Pillar VC, has a template about this, and they have this link here that you'll see in the doc goes to a blog post they have where they kind of talk about their own approach to it. And it goes back to like the rocks and pebbles idea of like, you know, exactly what Colin's saying. Really break it down into like, what is the most important thing for us right now, right? What is the most impact that we can have? Let's develop those big rocks that we have, and let's start breaking them down. So we've got our annual themes, which may fall into different buckets. We've got some examples here. Obviously, you'd want to fill this out with like actual things, but the important thing here is to take it into keep in mind, you know, SMART goals, making it specific, measurable, achievable. I forget the other two because I'm not that smart. But then breaking them down into the quarterly objectives, and the key part here is giving something an owner, and then making sure there's a clear measure of success, and that you're actively monitoring for it. So what their suggestion was, like, you know, if you can break down like, okay, here's what we want to get for the year. And maybe there's like these different buckets, and maybe not all of these apply to you. Maybe you don't want to focus on all of these at once. Maybe you are, like the poll suggests, everyone's focused on acquisition. Or maybe you're to a point where it's more, you got to that point that Colin was talking about in year 3, where he's like, okay, we've got to pause client acquisition until we get everything streamlined on our operations side, right? So it could vary. But then once you have that, then think about, let's not just think about this in yearly terms. Let's think about the next 3 months. Let's think about the next month. And let's get our to-do list there and start assigning some stuff and delegating. So just wanted to give this doc to you. Again, I realize it's pretty basic, but hopefully this could help you guys at least get going in kind of a good direction. Colin and Tom, anything you want to say to that? Kind of responding to this doc or that way of like, going from strategy to tactical execution?
Yeah, one thing I think is really important about this is that you sit down with your team and whiteboard out, and you go over, especially like you said, Jonathan, that ownership of particular tasks and goals. Where do you want to be, and put that on someone? So if you have a service manager and you expect a certain level of customer satisfaction, you put a score down that you want to achieve, and then you have a means by tracking that and what they are accountable for. And I think that's something that's very hard in a small MSP is you're wearing a lot of hats, you're doing a lot of things, and you lose track of these goals. But by segmenting them out and putting them down like you have there on the table, putting them up on the whiteboard and assigning them and then going over them on a regular basis, weekly or a couple times a month, is really going to make sure those happen.
Tom, can you speak a little bit about the sales and marketing shift for you? Because I know that you had the transition first where you were able to kind of get outside of the day-to-day technical work and you were still owning sales and marketing. I think a lot of people, some of the questions here, they get into, okay, yeah, how do they handle sales and marketing? Do they do it themselves or do they outsource? What tools should they use? All that kind of thing. Can you talk about your path there? Because I know at one point you ended up eventually hiring internal salespeople as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's very important on that. I find that as an MSP, you're going to have to bring in salespeople if you really want to scale, especially if you want an eventual exit. It's the only way to get that consistent growth, have that pipeline really full. On marketing, my recommendation always is get some help with it. Maybe it's just someone kind of intern, but maybe you need more help. Get some type of MSP marketing company to help you out. Bring in some of those tools. But if you try to do those functions that you're maybe not an expert at internally, such as marketing, you're probably going to find you don't have the right cadence. You don't get those things done. You don't get enough touches in. But I think it's very important to sit down and strategize out those pieces, particularly where you don't have the expertise, and realize that where you don't have the expertise and where do you need to bring people in, and then bring in those resources.
Oh man, good point. And it goes back to something that Colin was talking about in terms of Colin's loves to reverse engineer things, right? And so, I mean, we're talking about things at a high level with company growth, but you can also kind of zoom in and look at sales and marketing approaches, and you can reverse engineer that too. I mean, if you've been operating long enough, you can kind of look and get a feel for, what it took to get your clients, and maybe a lot of them are built on referrals, but you can start to kind of break down, here's how, and this is the importance of tracking things and reporting, right? But you're able to kind of break down, here's how many touches it does take on average. Yep. Here's the kind of effort it did take to bring on X amount of clients. If I want to grow this amount, this is what I need to do. And so if I bring someone on to take on that role, here's kind of what I can expect. Colin, any reaction to that at all?
I have a lot of thoughts.
Okay, let's hear it.
So I guess the first thing I'll say, like with this sheet that you've so ingeniously put together yourself,
which I stole.
Here's the one thing is, and I'll go back to the famous Bill Gates quote, right? That most people will overestimate or, overassume what they can achieve in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 10. If you're looking at this sheet and you look at everything that needs to happen to get to the target you're looking to get to in that year, and maybe you're a smaller organization and your name is the one in the owner's box of all of these tasks, then you kind of have two choices. Am I going to bring people in who can help me get all of these things done and I can make them owners? Or am I going to relax my expectations and change what my target was because it's just not going to be achievable? The other thing that I would do part and parcel with this is you kind of have a burn chart. There's 12 months, 52 weeks, 4 quarters in a year. You can't always just be looking at, okay, where am I at now? It's what have I got left to do and how much time do I have left to do it in? And there may be times where you have to reset or right set your expectations that, okay, we way overreached here. Now I can either be completely discouraged and shut off. I can use this as inspiration and still hit that. Or I can say, no, this isn't going to happen. Let's right set it down a little bit and make the plan that goes after that, so that you can still have that win. Now going back to Tom's comment about, if you want to grow your business or grow your MSP, you need to hire salespeople. I don't want him to bring out his Wolverine claws or anything, but I'm going to disagree a little bit, kind of, in that, because I'm quoted as saying the worst hires I ever made in my MSP was salespeople. Because I had so much expectation that these people were going to drive and grow the business to a level that, I couldn't, or that the business wouldn't have naturally gotten to. There's a few things that I learned over time, and they remain true regardless of what type of business you're running, who you're dealing with, what segment you're selling to, or wherever you are. And that's that, one, people buy from people. Doesn't matter that it's a business you're selling to, it's still a person on the other end that's making that decision, and they're doing it with what their own feelings are, and generally that surfaces around their feelings of knowing you, liking you, and trusting you to do well by them. And so what you have to do when you're looking at the marketing stuff is, what actions can I take to make people feel like they know me, make them like me, and then earn their trust? And there's a million different ways you can go about it. And I know there's all these strategies and marketing tactics and stuff out there. We opened an office that was 3 hours away from us, from where our head office was, and we opened a second office. Just that minute difference, the culture, the business culture there was 180 degrees different, like way different. It was just, it was a blue collar town or a city, where we are, it was very white collar, right? Like it's just different business culture. So how we went about business in where I live was very different about how we had to go there. So not every marketing tactic is going to work the same way wherever you are. So you need to try out a whole ton of different things to get that. One of the best ways these days, social media, like it or not, that's the way to get access to people and leverage your network on LinkedIn. Provide advice, provide counsel. Don't always have a gotcha in there. You look at this session, Ninja's putting out all of these things for you guys to use and do better in your business, and they're not forcing you to sign up with them to go on and keep doing business with them. So back to my disagreement slightly with Tom is, yes, you need people focused on sales to grow your business. I disagree that you need to hire salespeople. We failed when we did that. And when we started to think through that whole concept of know, like, and trust, well, who do your clients already know? Who do they like and who do they trust? That's the technicians that were doing the work for them. So what we did is we invested in sales training and sales, strategy, guidance to our technical team. Help them identify opportunities, surface opportunities, have conversations with clients, convince them to move forward with other projects, move up the ladder on our, service offering options, make them aware of new things. That was the scalable thing for us. Because one, they got money driven, they got some commission, they got more work to do, they got all of these great things, and they felt good about themselves, seeing the direct impact to the growth of the business and revenue that they had. So that's what we did. Maybe it wouldn't work for everybody, but that was the path we went down to help them become more personable, more sales and opportunity focused, and help them transform the growth of the business.
I think that's a good point, Colin. And I too know MSPs that haven't hired salespeople at all. As a matter of fact, a good friend of mine has gotten his revenue up to close to 20 million a year. Never had a salesperson. I can tell you, but a lot of that were the circumstances of the clients he had and technicians. I can tell you, my technicians were not great at the piece you're talking about, despite training, stuff like that. I needed to, for the way I grew my business, the way I managed, I needed to utilize salespeople. And I think that many out there do, but it is difficult. It's hard to find the right people. It's hard to get that going. And there are a lot of costs up front. But yeah, it's important. Look at where your growth comes from and focus on that. And if you have technicians that are particularly good at driving new business, foster that. Bring in people, coach them up, as Colin said. But look for that way it is. So when I'm speaking, I'm often speaking to me. And for me, I hit a point where I didn't have consistent growth and I didn't have a consistent pipeline. And for me to do that, I had to stock myself full at least of a couple salespeople to keep that rolling.
Yeah, totally fair, right? I think as we identified this opportunity, we did the same thing you did. Hey, how can we foster and what is it about the technicians that are being more successful at this than others? And there's this whole concept about trait analysis when you're doing hiring. And the whole concept goes, if you look at your best employees, try to break down the traits of what makes them the best employee. And that's not showing up on time and putting their timesheets in or whatever else. It's intrinsically in who they are. How do they talk? Are they introverted? Are they extroverted? How do they approach problem solving and all of these things? And then use that to fashion your interviewing and candidate selection process as you're bringing more people in. And similarly, you can look at some of your back of the bussers and see what traits makes them back of the bussers, so that those are the things you can avoid as you're hiring. And so, yeah, that changed our strategy a lot. Once we clued in on the ability to leverage technicians, we made sure that as we were hiring, that we were bringing on more charismatic people who are more extroverted, who, you know, had more accommodating approaches to things that made us feel good, that were really good on selling themselves to get the job, right? And because we believe too, there's a lot of things about like sales that you can't teach somebody. You can teach them approaches and tactics and everything. And much to Tom's point, like if you have a very introverted person who's just very engineering focused, that's probably not going to be the fit. We believed we could teach technology and we could teach troubleshooting steps, and we could backfill them on whatever else was needed. So in some cases, there were some people that were less technically inclined, and more social and more charismatic and outgoing that way, that we then got them on the fast track of, here's how we're going to pay for your, certifications, teach you this, train you that, when it came to the technology tools.
Well, guys, we're coming up around the hour here, and I do want to, just before we go, we have a couple of upcoming things we want to give a shout out to. I also just kind of want to close on your point, Colin, about carving out the time to try different things, especially with marketing, right? Because I saw Rich. Rich was persistently asking, yeah, but what's the tactic that Colin used the best, like the guy in the most traction? What? Because in a way, like a lot of people are looking for the silver bullet, right? Or just the answer, like, what do I try? And I can absolutely empathize with the fact that like a lot of times you get a mushy answer because it depends on so many different things, and things are so interwoven. And just for us, for example, there is lots of research and stats that we have at Ninja that shows how intertwined our paid advertising, our LinkedIn ads, our Google ads, YouTube, are related to our organic efforts as well, right? And so it's kind of hard to pin down, and especially when you're just getting started. You want to be able to focus on a couple of things at a time. You can't try it all at once. And so knowing what to focus on can be difficult. What I will say is this. I'm going to follow up with the email that goes out to everybody who attended here and all the series registrants. And we'll give you access to this doc here, but we'll also point you to, we've got a whole bunch of articles that will make, that kind of walk you through an initial DIY approach to a lot of different things. If you want to get started with LinkedIn ads, we got a guide for you. If you want to get started with some PPC, like some Google ads, we got an ad for you, or a guide for you there too. Some webinars, tons of stuff. So you can kind of at least have a leg up there. And then to Tom's point, we'll also include links to, you guys all know this, right? I'm sure you get spam emails and everything all the time. There's so many marketing resources out there that are wanting to help you. We've got some that we've talked with that we know are good folks, and we can point you some directions there too. But all that said, before everyone jumps here and goes away, I just want to call some attention to upcoming events, right? So we already mentioned, well, before we get into Colin's great upcoming event, man, we got an in-person event. This is not the standard thing these days, but for those folks who are in Florida and the Orlando area, you'll have a chance to meet with some folks from the team here. And I know some other great people who have been on the chats in our previous events too are going to be there. Jason Slagle and a few others. There's an Orlando in-person event on Friday, November 12th in the evening, and it's going to be at Top Golf Orlando. As the image shows you there's golf, but more importantly, there's beer and maybe some chicken wings, it looks like, and some prizes, maybe a Yeti cooler, so that's something to check out. Colin, you already gave this one plug, but let's get another one. Leg Up, the virtual event that's going to be happening on Wednesday, November 17th. That you guys are putting on that event. You got a ton of great speakers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Much like you said, all of these tools that you gave help these guys get a leg up. It's the same thing. It's the whole reason behind the name of the event is it's all purpose driven content and information and pulling things together to help MSPs get a leg up as they enter the next year. So a ton of great sponsors that are participating, bringing great content to the event. We're covering, a lot about our grand vision for this industry and how we're going to go about it. We got some exciting news dropping on Monday that leads into this all. And yeah, beyond anything else, it's one of these things where you can come walk away with some great information, understand what you can do to grow your business. And I'm participating in an AMA. So, if any of the people have other questions about how I did what I did, what's gone on in my career, what we're doing at Gradient, anything else, nothing's off limits there. So it's for us to give back to whatever the community wants from us. So
that's fantastic. And maybe we do have a couple other questions here. Maybe we can address off once the chat's done. But getting into like more numbers driven stuff, profitability and things like that. Also, lunch for a month. That's not bad.
Yeah, we're doing 2 draws for lunch for a month of the first 1,000 registrants. I haven't checked the number yet, so I don't know how many slots are available yet to get in on that draw. But yeah, just register up, and we'll be doing those draws when we hit the 1,000 to give lunch for a month through Uber Eats to 2 lucky winners.
Awesome. As long as there's not a toe of Satan or anything spicy like that in there.
You get to choose. That's Uber Eats. You choose what you're getting.
Fair enough. We have an MSP live chat coming up the day after. So this is your you go for the main course there, Colin's event, and then you get the after hours, the aperitif of our MSP live chat. We're going to have our guest Kelvin Teklar from CyberDrain from Lime Networks. He's going to be going over his new tool, which is definitely making waves, and we'll include links to. We've got one right here in the doc. CIPP, which is a Microsoft management tool, which he developed. A lot of folks in the MSP community are diving in and contributing to. It's a really cool thing that he's got going on. We're also going to be expanding out and talking about M365 management and security, news about Defender, all sorts of stuff. So we'll be talking about that on our next live chat. So keep an eye out for that. And then, ways to keep in touch before then. We've got MSP Bento that you can sign up for. We've also got a Slack group. And if you guys, there's a link at the top of this doc to join that group. And I'll be diving in. Maybe Tom, you'll join us too, and we can keep the conversation going. But guys, thank you so much, Colin. Thank you so much, Tom, as always, for taking the time. And thank you, everybody who joined. These are great questions, great conversation. Hopefully this gives you guys some good starting points for planning. And let us know what you thought. Respond to those emails that are going to be going out to you guys with those resources. Let us know what you want to hear next. And hopefully we'll see you at one of these upcoming events.
Great.
Awesome.
Thanks
for
everybody.
having me.
All right. Take care, everyone.